Thank you very much. It's a real delight to be here with you today. I'm delighted with the nice turnout. Would like to thank Governor Partee for coming over and participating. It's a delight. We've done this in the past, and we always have a good time. And I'm always reminded to say that some of my best friends are members of the Federal Reserve Board. So it is real nice that Governor Partee has come over. And it is true, we both served on the Gold Commission, and this is where I came to know Governor Partee, and we have developed a friendship over this period of time since we served on that commission. First off, it's the issue of central planning. So often there are many conservatives who believe that central planning in farming and agriculture and producing steel and doing anything in the economy outside of money is a disaster. They say, well, look at the results of central planning in Russia. Look at the central planning in any socialist nation, and they reject it outright, and I believe correctly. But in the same sense, they reject central planning in every other area, but wholeheartedly endorse the same concept with central planning in money. And I have come to the conclusion that central planning of money is just as disastrous as central planning in farming. And therefore, just the general idea, the notion that man is capable of planning the economy by controlling the money. But the one thing is different about planning centrally the money supply as compared to planning farming. Farming only feeds us, but the money sustains every single transaction. It is a participant in everything that we do. It is the unit of account that we have to measure every transaction. All our services and all our goods are measures in terms of the unit of account. And if we believe that we can plan centrally and determine that unit of account without the market participating, I think we get what we have now, very chaotic conditions, which are bound to get more chaotic after a period of time. So I don't believe that central planning in money can be successful. I happen to believe and accept the ideas of the Austrian School of Economics, as Mises in particular explained, that the business cycle is precisely caused by central planning of money, and that the booms and busts are inevitable. That as we drive the economy this year and for next year's election, you will see conditions improve, but sure enough, you will see the consequence of the inflation that we have today. In a couple years, you will see the recession, if not the depression of '86 or '87. So it is for this reason, out of a humanitarian concern for our people, that we must reject the notion of central planning in money, just as we reject the central ideas of central planning in agriculture or steel manufacturing. So central planning of money, I reject outright. The second major reason why I reject the notion of paper money is the issue of power. I believe we must address this because even though those who wield the power and the control of the money, I sincerely believe they're well motivated to do what is good and right for the people. Just as the liberal interventionist is assuming he's doing good by building houses for the poor people. But they never take into account that they tear down more houses than they build up. And that so much of the HUD money goes to building country club communities. So I would say the same thing happens because the power is abused and misdirected. But it's an ominous power. There is no other power greater than the power over money. The power to create and contract the money supply. The power to control the purchasing power of your money. Throughout history, this has proven to be the most sought after monopolistic power of man. And it has become more sophisticated over the decades and over the centuries, more sophisticated now and more international in scope than ever before. So I see the issue of power and the control over money as being something that we cannot ignore, we must address. So I think it's important to address the issue of central planning, the issue of power, and third, I think that we must address in general terms the issue of the origin of money. I know that's been talked about, and we recognize, those of us who believe in commodity money, clearly understand that money, paper money and credit creation didn't come out of the marketplace. That came out of the heads and the fantasies of the intellectuals and the government officials of those who want paper to be money, but never out of the marketplace. So I would say the paper standard is bucking history, and it's bucking economic law and economic truth, and they only can do it with force and more power to make people accept it. Because economically and historically, paper is not money. It can't be money. It's only money because we're forced to use it and because there's a residual trust in the pieces of paper that we carried around, because at one time it did have real value. Just think for a moment. If all of us were stranded on a small island and we had absolutely nothing else, no trade, but we were all put on the island and we were expected to survive, we would have to do what to create capital to survive? We would have to get our food and build our houses and make our tools. And everything that we had in excess of what we consumed could be our capital, and we could trade it. But how many of you would accept the idea that if we were all working busily and making trades and somebody gives a bushel of wheat for a bushel of corn, how many of you would accept the notion if we had the one individual to arrive on the beach and he said, "I'll solve all your problems, I'm going to create wealth for you. I have this little thing called a printing press, and I'm going to print up Federal Reserve notes, and you'll all be wealthy"? How many would trust the individual? He would probably be thrown off the island for coming up with a scandalous idea. It wouldn't work. You have to have something that people seek after and they hold as something important and something that they will hold as money. History shows that people have chosen gold first and probably silver second. But most people, when they're driven into the economy, they'd rather have cigarettes than pieces of paper. I do believe I would concede to Governor Partee about the preconditions. I, for one, see a lot of shortcomings, and if I could wave that wand tomorrow and have my gold standard, I may end up being discredited, because I see gold and the issue of money as more part of an entire system of government philosophy. And that is, if we had the philosophy of government intervention overseas and militarism, and if we have a government that is going to run a welfare state, and we had the gold standard that we would like tomorrow, I don't believe the gold standard is strong enough to present and make the people live within their means and limit the power of government. So I see the gold standard as one that restrains and keeps the government from drifting and going off a system which is limited, but I don't see it as the panacea. So I would say the conditions are very bad. I don't think they're as good as they were after the Civil War. There was a lot more trust in the system and trust in the money after the Civil War, and from 1876 to 1879 they were able to resume convertibility. I believe our conditions are much worse, and therefore I do believe that if it's done carelessly, we could get into a lot of problems. And I think there's a great danger of accepting a pseudo-gold standard, which is essentially what we've had most of the time throughout history. And if we accept that and go to a standard that you could suspend rather easily, if it's a fractional reserve, it's not a gold coin standard, I do believe that that type of a gold standard would not serve us well. I would also say that it is true that when you do, even if you have a very good gold standard, yes, there is always a threat, just like there's always a threat that our civil liberties will be abused, that our right of free speech would be abused. In times of war, our civil liberties are taken from us. So I don't think that's any justification, but I would say that, because our civil liberties are taken away from us, because we lose the right of free speech, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with the right of free speech. There's something wrong with the politicians who take away the right, or something wrong with the people who take the gold standard from us. So I would not see this as a reason not to have a gold standard, because there is a threat, and I concede there certainly would be a threat, as there have been over the centuries, that when politicians want more power to finance war or a welfare system, they indeed destroy the money. So I would say that it is that notion of government that is a greater threat to us than the gold standard itself. First point that Governor Partee made was that of the need to expand the money supply, the economic need for an increase in money in order to accommodate economic growth and population growth. I don't accept that. I think there's a fallacy in that. I don't think it's necessary at all because, again, I go back to a more primitive society when it's very easy to see what you need is production, you need work, and you need effort. That you don't produce anything with the creation of money and credit. That is only a vehicle, and the unit of account is something that we measure our productive efforts by, but it doesn't produce it. It does in an inflationary climate at the early stages of an inflation. By deceiving the people and creating new money, there's a deception, and yes, people do feel better, and it might stimulate for a while. Maybe even for decades, but eventually it does the opposite. And that's what I'm afraid we're moving into now, where even the stimulation that we have today will not produce what we want and desire. And at each time we go through a cycle, we need more and more. And I believe the figures bear this out. In the past year, we've had to have more monetary inflation in order to achieve what we could achieve in previous recessions with a lot less new money. So to me, it's entirely unimportant about how much gold there is. Totally unimportant about how much new gold there is. And I don't see it as a problem if you're having economic growth and you have a gold dollar. If you put $1 in the bank and you get 3% interest, so you get $1 plus 3%, but your purchasing power goes up because prices went down, but there's economic growth. I see no problem. I think that's a good deal. I think that's more incentive to save, and therefore more capital, and more reason for people to invest in the future because things are looking good. I do not equate decreasing prices with depression. I equate depression with bad economic climates and a decreasing money supply in an artificial system which brings it about. But to have prices going down is no concern at all. It can be a definite asset. And it is true, though, that you don't have to worry about a steady money supply under a gold standard. Most likely there would be an increase. The average is 3%, about what the monetarists would like to increase the money supply at. But it is true it's erratic. I agree with Governor Partee. It is erratic. One year you might have a 5% increase, one year a 1% increase. But to me that is unimportant as well. The most important thing is that you have a free pricing mechanism. If you're worried about price fixing and a price level, that's different. But if the prices are allowed to fluctuate because there's an influx of gold or an outflow of gold from the country, as long as the pricing mechanism is there, there really is no deep concern. But the chances of having gold inflation today is rather slim. My real concern is about the paper inflation. You know, they say, watch out for Russia. They could, withhold gold or dump gold. You know, it would take them 100 years to double the supply of gold in the country, so therefore to really significantly affect the purchasing power of gold. 100 years to produce that much gold. Took the Fed only 10 years to nearly triple M3. So I would say that's what you have to worry about. But it is indeed true that if you have paper currencies, whether they're loosely linked to gold or not linked to gold, printing at different rates, fixed exchange rates would be totally chaotic. Even under the Bretton Woods Agreement, there were thousands of periodic devaluations because even then they weren't supposed to be printing at different rates and they were supposed to link their currencies together to the dollar. But there was always abuse because governments had this insatiable desire to create credit. The concern about flow of gold in and out, if it's a gold dollar, it doesn't matter. If for some reason our goods are priced too high and we are buying goods overseas, gold will go out. Our gold money will go out, and then there will be less of a gold supply. That is not a concern to me, because then as long as there's free pricing mechanism, the prices will drop down and then our goods will be more attractive and gold will come back in. To me, it's just important that you don't have a static economy and say that gold must be this, increasing at a certain rate. Let the market handle these things. The market is much smarter than we are in trying to determine what the money should be.